Hi there, everybody, and welcome to the Art of Procurement podcast. I'm Philip Ideson.
And I'm Kelly Barner.
And all through November, we're celebrating 5 years of the Art of Procurement podcast.
And to celebrate, we're answering some of the most frequently asked questions that we have received from listeners since the podcast began with a daily 5-minute show.
Today's question that we received is, how will procurement outsourced services and the way that companies can leverage them be impacted by the changing economy? Well, let me share just a little bit of background first. So I have a lot of experience in the procurement outsourcing world. I worked in India for a year leading a captive shared service. This is back probably the 2007, 2008 timeframe, and then was involved in for the first time in outsourcing category management and sourcing back in 2008. I then delivered procurement services for Procurian and then Accenture after Accenture acquired Procurian. And today, Art of Procurement actually has a procurement services offering called Experts on Demand. So with that context, about 5 years ago, procurement outsourcing was all the rage, where companies would outsource the sourcing and category management, and they'd kind of do it en masse. It was sold as procurement in a box, if you will. And service providers would get some really good initial results. They would take a fresh approach to spend that hadn't really been run through a strong procurement process before, or they'd come across, organizations that didn't really previously utilize any market intelligence. They were perhaps more focused on leverage and just running RFP processes when building the sourcing or category strategies. So using that intel, having those insights really made a big difference. But those deals were often savings-based, and once the initial savings were realized, the contracts really struggled to continue to demonstrate an ROI. And often these contracts were 3 to 5 years in duration, so you'd find that either midterm or the end of the term, they'd start to get renegotiated and usually look a little bit different, focusing on different categories or perhaps, a smaller, more agile kind of delivery model. So today, fast forward a few years, today's solutions are typically much more targeted on a specific spend category, specific deal, or a single part of the category management or the sourcing process. Now, in an economy like we see today, procurement services actually do pretty well. The reason being is that, unfortunately, the reality is that when organizations are struggling, they do have to look at laying people off and reducing headcount, but budget often exists for professional services, and so professional services firms come in to fill the gap of the work that still needs to be done when the organization was reducing what they look at as being more of a fixed cost in their employee costs. So I think procurement services firms will certainly become as important to procurement organizations today, or perhaps more so over the next couple of years. So ways to use procurement services company today. Well, there's really 3 different ways. One is use them as a SWAT team, to support company-wide expense management programs. Those are the ones that you're looking at cost reduction and expense management on a programmatic basis. You need a number of experts to come in to help do that, but it's not necessarily a long-term sustained model. You can look at it at a category of spend or an event focus where the services firm brings somebody in who's an expert in that particular category, who's a deep expert in the category, and they manage the entire process from start to finish. And then once that deal is done, or when the elements of the category strategy are done, that's really the end of their engagement. Or you can consider using a subject matter expert on a more surgical basis. For example, in the background of a sourcing event, to coach your existing resource that you have on the team who may be more of a generalist on what does the supplier landscape look like? What are some of the sourcing strategies that can be used? What are others doing in that space for pricing, negotiation, contracting strategies, and again, behind the scenes coaching in the execution of those. So that's using procurement services essentially as an on-demand contextualized market intelligence resource. And what that does is it gives you the insights and the intel that you need, and knowing the market helps speed up the process as well. So it's kind of a two-for. You get a faster sourcing process or renegotiation process, and you get it informed by experienced expertise. but that you actually have your person internally who continues to manage and maintain that internal stakeholder relationship. And that's actually something, kind of an approach we focus on with our Art of Procurement experts on demand. So I do think that procurement services are going to play an ever increasing role as the internal procurement functions, and especially those in small to mid-cap companies, really make that switch from being category subject matter experts, which is what we often try to do a lot now, to the idea of being a lot more relational and account management focused, where you have somebody in the team who is focused on that stakeholder relationship, and then some experts that you bring in to use when you need, who are really more focused on the deals and the categories and have those specific market insights. That's really a model that's, I'm seeing being more and more successful. And the one thing that is always the biggest risk when you are outsourcing kind of wholesale categories is you're also outsourcing relationship management. And that's a really dangerous spot for you to be in when the day comes when you want to bring that in and you have no relationship with your stakeholders. I want to thank you for listening to today's podcast. All the podcasts in this series can be found at artofprocurement.com/5 years. That's the number 5. That's artofprocurement.com/5 years.